Aloha and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Got Your Six podcast. This six-question podcast brings together high performers to share their methods, strategies, and ideas, delivered in an informative and, most importantly, actionable way that'll help you lead yourself and those around you from the battlefield to the boardroom. Coming to you every episode, I'm your host, Tony Nash. And into the breach.
Nothing mentioned on this podcast is an endorsement or opinion of the Department of Defense.
I got your six, we got your back. Got your six, we got your back. Got your six, we got your back. I got your six.
Sixers, what an unbelievable treat we have today. And when I say treat, I mean this is going to be a delicious episode. Greg Fischer, co-founder of Burn Pit BBQ, is joining us. Greg, thank you so much for coming on the Got Your Six podcast.
Hey, Tony, it's my pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity to be out here and to talk with you.
So as we were kind of talking before the show started, right, like the connections between being in the Marines and then now starting a barbecue business, where do you think is like the most like common thread that you constantly see every day?
I'd say just the unknown, like what is the day going to bring? I know, like, especially like, maybe overseas in combat, you never know what you're going to get, and being a small business owner, it's kind of the same way. You never know what's going to happen. And then you're always kind of firefighting, challenges as they come up. So I could see that those are probably the two things that I compare it to quite a bit.
Now, when you talk firefighting, right, like how do you prepare for the unknown, especially as an entrepreneur and going through, I know you have a little bit of background, especially in finance. How do you approach that? Because everybody kind of looks at it a little bit differently.
I think for me, it's just like already having an understanding, like there are going to be challenges that come my way that I'm not going to have the answer to right away. And coming from that perspective and that understanding, it allows me a lot of opportunity and flexibility to seek those answers and, be truthful and authentic with my audience and my customers that, hey, I don't have all the right answers, but I'm going to find it for you. And we're going to still get the job done. But I think that that honesty and that integrity is what we kind of base our entire business off of.
And when you talk about that honesty and integrity, can you give us a recent example where you kind of had to go and apply that was, like you said, authentic to you and the brand and what you and the team are doing?
Yeah, so we get approached quite a bit for partnerships and, people wanting us to promote their products. We do have quite a large social media following on Instagram and Facebook, so we get approached all the time. And one of the things that we want to make sure that we continue to do is to serve our customers and our clients. So anytime we look at a partnership or a potential partnership, we need to dive more into what that business is, what do they do, and how does it fit in? Does this really have or add value to who we're trying to serve? So recently we've had to turn down a few partners that potential partnerships because it just didn't fit and align with the values that we have and then the value that we want to bring to our existing clients and customers.
Where do you think that understanding of honesty and integrity and like authenticity comes from? Was that something you took away from your time in the Marine Corps, or is there somebody else that you can kind of look to and like say like, hey, I can see you smiling, so I can already hear the story.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of both, right? So anybody that goes through military boot camp, you get a little bit of that instilled into you right away, is making sure that you're being true to yourself and true to the mission. But for us being entrepreneurs and businessmen, me and my business partner, we continue to grow and evolve. So we've always wanted to improve who we are, have growth mindset. So a lot of that has to do with being who we are, not trying to be somebody else, and obviously taking pieces of what we like and incorporating that with who we are. But ultimately we have to be I have to be Greg, and my business partner Ben has to be Ben, and people see through if you're trying to be somebody you're not. So we just figured, hey, let's be ourselves and see where it takes us.
Now, how did you find out who Greg is, right? Like that's like a heavy
Yeah.
question, right? That requires a lot. It's a very complex problem. You got to boil down to something simply.
Mm-hmm.
Like, walk us through that.
Yeah, it took a while. It took a while. Even after, I transitioned out of the Marine Corps, I was still searching for who I was post-military career, because for, since I was 18 till I was 22, I was a U.S. Marine who was involved heavily overseas in combat, and now I had to come back home to Wisconsin and find out who Greg is, and it took me years to do that. And the only way that I could figure out, who I was and who I continue to be is to continue to grow and learn and try different things and put myself into uncomfortable positions, so I could continue to grow and truly find out who I was. And it took years, and I'm still learning, but it took a lot of time, and I don't think that process will ever end.
What are some of those uncomfortable positions you put yourself in?
Yeah. Well, being kind of an introvert by nature, things like this, talking about myself. And, when I was in the corporate world, I would take on tasks that weren't necessarily assigned to me, but you might call them stretch roles, where I'd get up in front of audiences and I'd speak, something that didn't come natural to me that I had to work on, that I had to learn about. So those types of things I'd say, and then, trying to, put myself in position to be recognized and in leadership roles maybe before I was ready for them, as a way to continue to grow and build that skill set.
Now, you talked about being in front of an audience and being an introvert, right? Not being something you were most comfortable with. What did that look like in terms of rehearsing and preparing for that actual moment? And then what your thoughts and feelings were after the event?
Yeah, so early on in my career, and when I was first starting to speak on stage in front of audiences or virtually like this, there was hours of prep work behind that. Like, I had to get down to what I wanted to talk about, and then I'd go through it. Sometimes I would record myself, sometimes I wouldn't. But then, looking back and going through the debrief of that, okay, I'd always ask people who were close to me that might have been there, what resonated with you, what worked well. Hey, what didn't you like about what I was, how I delivered it or how I was talking. So those types of things, is always constantly getting feedback. And again, being humble, and not knowing that I'm not perfect, and there's always going to be opportunities for me to get better. So setting my ego aside, even if I don't like what I'm going to hear, but taking that feedback and using it, because it's ultimately going to make me a better speaker, a better person. So that's kind of how I approached it early on. A lot different now. I've done a number of podcasts. I've spoken in a number of different large venues in front of people. So now it's kind of more of streamlined, where I kind of know what I'm going to talk about. I've had a lot of chances to, practice, which is awesome. But yeah, I know it's never over. So there's going to be things I'll take away from this, and I'll go back and I'll try and refine. But it's an ongoing process.
How did you select those trust agents, essentially, right? So it's not, you don't always somebody that's going to agree with you and say, "Hey, Greg, great job." You want people that are like, "Hey, that you really kind of botched it a little bit." How do you go through selecting those people?
I think a lot of times they naturally come to you, as far as the type of people that you surround yourself with. So, like for me in a corporate environment, I naturally gravitated towards those folks that were, up and coming, or had some initiative behind them. So I knew I could trust those people to give me honest feedback. But then also your leaders, the people that should be leading you, if you can't get honest and direct feedback from them, you're probably in the wrong spot, and you need to find people like that. And I was fortunate throughout my time in my corporate career that I had people that advocated for me, to put me in those positions, but then also gave me honest feedback about where I still needed to improve, to get better. So you should be looking and seeking out those types of leaders as well.
So what I'm hearing too is not only advocacy, but also mentorship and coaching were concurrent, and maybe not always the same people, right? Because sometimes maybe that direct leader isn't your mentor, but they are still coaching and sponsoring you throughout the process.
Yeah, that's correct, and it shouldn't be on them. It should be on you to go seek those people out, and that's the biggest thing. One of the biggest thing I would recommend is when I talk to student veterans or transitioning veterans, I always mention, hey, nobody's going to come tap you on the shoulder to say, hey, why don't you go lead this project, or why don't you take over this team? You have to go out and you have to find and you have to fight for those opportunities, because they're not just going to show up for you. So, and that's kind of how I approach my career, and I seek those individuals out that are at a place where I want to be, or I admire them for a certain reason. And a lot of it has to do with me taking the initiative to start that conversation.
So taking that initiative now, and fighting for those opportunities. What does that challenge look like today?
As well, for a new barbecue brand, the first thing is when you're looking from a consumer perspective is there's a lot of unknown, right? So people don't know what your product is, what it tastes like, how good it is. So we're constantly fighting, the large established brands that are out there that people already know about. So seizing those types of opportunities, and then going out and searching for opportunities as far as, me being on this podcast with you today, Tony, talking about who I am and what I do. And then also, small retailers, butcher shops, samplings, farmers markets. So we're trying everything we can do to, get in front of people. And I think the more that we create that momentum, the more things will start coming back to us.
What do you think it is that's kind of helped? I mean, I think you've had meteoric success and it's continuing to go in the short time, right? But what is that? Do you think it's relationships and building those relationships, or is there something else that you and Ben kind of look at and be like, this is why this is our differentiator?
Yeah, I think relationships are very important. For us, we come from the business world where we were establishing networks and relationships long before we launched this business, which helped some of that momentum right away. But at the same time, like that authenticity of who we are, we know exactly who we are and we know exactly who we're going after and targeting as far as customers. We're very, very focused and hyper-focused, I would say, on a certain market. So it allows us not to get distracted by all the other opportunities that might come our way that might not necessarily fit with what we're going after. So being hyper-focused, having the ability to build relationships as well, I think helped us quickly out of the gate, kind of knowing where we wanted to go, and we could start sprinting right away.
Scott Mackes on an earlier episode talked about niching down twice. How did you guys distill who you're looking at, your clientele, and making sure you're staying focused on the mission and not getting distracted by a lot of the other noise that's out there?
Yeah, and we're not perfect. We've taken opportunities. I think that if I could go back and tell myself, hey, that probably wasn't the right one for us at the time. But for us, we were actually look at ourselves 10 years ago. So being a barbecue and grilling, focused business, we initially set out to help first-time grillers and barbecuers. So it was easy for us because we could put ourselves in those shoes, right? And then also when we look at more on the retail side of selling our products, our rubs and our sauces, we wanted to dominate our home state of Wisconsin. Right now, I would say Wisconsin is probably not well known for its barbecue, but for us, it's important that we need to dominate the backyard first before we start looking, across the country. Now we do have a national presence, but when it comes to our retail partnerships, we're very hyper focused on just our home state first, and then when we feel we're in a good place here, then we'll start looking to branch out. But that's how we kind of decided right away, how we're going to go after this business. And, so far it's worked well for us not to get too big too fast, but it also allowed us opportunities to grow.
Do you find that you have to kind of check yourself, not even personally or, professionally with you and Ben, where you kind of be like, hey, we could handle a lot more, but we need to build this kind of, in a strategic way as opposed to just kind of lighting the fire underneath and just seeing what happens?
Yeah, we have those conversations weekly. We have to continue to look at opportunities that are out there, and take advantage of the ones that present themselves to us, but then also be understanding we're in a business to make money, and we need to make sure that we continue to do that. Going forward, is this an opportunity that's going to allow us to continue to do that, or is this going to deviate from kind of our mission and our focus right now and potentially, take us off path. So we have those conversations almost weekly because we do get presented with a lot of opportunities, and we just have to make sure that we're vetting those opportunities correctly. And like I said, we're a two-man show right now with aspirations to be a large company in the future, but we also don't want to, set ourselves up for failure by growing too fast and not delivering on some of those promises that we want to keep to our existing retail partners and our customers.
So yeah, like you said, staying authentic and grow and controlling that growth to an extent. Would you say that as what has helped you both kind of continued on this upward trajectory, or is there another belief that has really been fundamental to that?
Yeah, the underlying belief is that we think we have a superior product and we connect well with who our target market is. And we'll continue to beat that drum as long as we can. But, for us to grow and to know, continue to know who our customers are, we are continuing to collect feedback. We're also continuing to see what our competitors are doing. I'm a big fan of continuing to buy what they offer so we can see what they're putting out there. But no, it helps us stay on track by focusing there. But no, I think we're always open to opportunities, but we're pretty strategic on how fast we go and we search those out.
You mentioned this earlier, right? You just talked about staying on track and seeking out the right opportunities. But in the past, that always hasn't been the case, and obviously in the future that might happen too. Can you talk about a failure, whether with Burn Pit BBQ or in the military, that was just absolutely massive, but ultimately led to just such an overriding, just incredible success that it kind of knocked you back and oh, if it wasn't for this, I wouldn't have gotten here.
Yeah, I'd say early on in Burn Pit, keeping it kind of recent, not everything's been perfect for us. When we first introduced our sauces at the beginning of 2021, our sauces come bottled in glass bottles. So when we were initially shipping those out to our customers that were buying them from us, we found that the people that were delivering those bottles don't take as much care as we do here internally. So within the first week of us launching those products and then shipping those, we probably had a 50% break rate. So half of the bottles we sent out were arriving to our customers that broken, right? Oh, no. So yeah, initial challenge. Okay, let's triage this right now. What's going on? What's happening? Oh, well, our packaging isn't that great, so it's getting broken on the way. Why is that happening? Well, we learned that the post offices have large conveyor belts that sometimes drop 6-9 feet, and then our glass bottles are snapping at the neck. Okay, all right, well, we got to package these differently, but in the meantime we need to get new bottles out to these customers at our cost, because that was our miscalculation. But what ultimately happened was those customers were extremely grateful that we sent them a new bottle right away, no cost to them, and we righted that wrong, and those customers continue to be with us today, nearly a year later, because we did that. So I think from that standpoint, you could look at that as ultimately a failure, but it allowed us a lot of learning opportunities as far as how we package, how we send glass bottles. And I can say it's been a long time since we've had a breakage in the mail because of those things that we learned early on. And those, that happens. We could have looked at that and just be like, oh man, this is terrible. But no, we just said, okay, let's pivot, let's move on, and let's learn from this and make sure it doesn't happen again.
So what ended up being the fix for how you package the bottle?
Yeah, very, at least initially right away, was a lot of bubble wrap and tape and packing paper. And we've continued to refine that process, and we're not done yet. We'll continue to research and invest in new technologies, so to speak. But we're always looking for ways to, again, reduce our shipping costs, but then also maintain, the integrity of the products that we send out. So that's always an ongoing research and development phase.
So as you look at R&D too, specifically, sometimes we talk about innovation. Where do you kind of look outside of the box, outside of the condiment realm and space, to kind of get insight to what you're doing to do it better?
Yeah, I mean, we look at companies that we follow and that we naturally, buy from. So, one company that comes to mind that we followed since they started was Black Rifle Coffee. Maybe similar industries, but different at the same time. So, we always look at what they're doing. How are they packaging? How are they presenting their products? What are they doing? So things like that. So we look outside. Coffee's a big one that we look at. There's a lot of other companies that we look up to in the coffee space that you might not necessarily think barbecue, but their brand and what they offer is pretty similar to what we are. And then some other things locally here. We look at what some of the local butchers and meat markets. Johnsonville Brats is close by here. We have Clemens sausages. So we look at, competitors that are not competitors, but people in similar industries. What are they doing? How are they continuing to get their customers excited? What new products are they bringing to life, and how are they marketing? So those are some of the ways that we continue to look and evolve, because we know we don't have all the answers, and we look to some of those other more established brands to help us, get there faster.
I absolutely love that. And Greg, as we kind of wrap up, I got one last question, right?
Yeah.
Constantly throughout about this growth mindset, and that what that looks like, long term. So let's break it down to the micro real quick.
Yeah.
Greg Fischer, how are you better today than yesterday?
I could tell you this because it just happened. So we have our products on Amazon, and we work with a partner that helps us there. But we do all of our in-house ads. So I do those. Whatever ads you see on Amazon or whatever, we help with the creative. And we recently did a video. Well, our video was rejected by Amazon because of the frames per second was a little bit over than what they require. So I had to learn how to reduce the frame per second in that video, which I just did before I got on this podcast. So that's how I'm better today right now.
I absolutely love that tactical. So where did you go to find out?
Well, I went to the old Google and I typed it in, and then a few how-tos came up. So I had to download a few free programs to my computer, and I drop it in there and then reduce the frames per second by a little bit, and then we should be good to go.
Absolutely love that. Greg, where can people go to learn more about you and Burn Pit BBQ?
Yeah, you can always go to our website. We're out there, burnpitbbq.com. And then also on the social medias, Facebook is Burn Pit BBQ. On Instagram, it's Burn Pit BBQ Guys. And then you can find me on LinkedIn, Greg Fischer. That's where I put a lot of my kind of more content relating to growth and development. So more of a personal feel.
Awesome. Greg, we'll make sure we link all of that in the show notes for this episode. Thank you so much for sharing your strategies, your methods, your ideas, and most importantly, thanks for having our six. Appreciate it.
Yeah. No, my pleasure, Tony. I appreciate it.
I don't know what you've been told, Sixers, but the lawyers would like us to remind you that the views, opinions, and comments expressed on the Got Your Six podcast are solely those of the hosts or guests, to include current and previous Department of Defense employees, and should in no way be considered the opinions of or endorsements on behalf of the Department of Defense or any of its components, divisions, contractors, or other current and previous staff members.